Welcome to Roots of Faith. I'm Renee Richard, and today begins a series of shows where we will be exploring the lives of 6 African Americans who are on the path to sainthood. So each week we will depict 2 individuals, and this week we begin with Pierre Toussaint of New York City, born in Haiti but lived his life in New York City, and also Mother Elizabeth Lange of Baltimore. So join us as we showcase the lives of these holy people. We're going to be talking about one of our candidates, and that is Pierre Toussaint, who was born in the 1700s. And I have with me Kathleen Bellow. And Kathleen is the director of the Institute of Black Catholics here at Xavier University. So you were telling me on our telephone conversation when I was originally planning to do these segments on these people that you were from the region up there, and you said you could,
I'm from the Northwest, although Baltimore is kind of in between.
In between there, yes. So we'll be talking today, first of all, with Pierre Toussaint. And then we'll do a segment on Mother Mary Lange. Right. So with Pierre Toussaint, although he was actually born in Haiti, I believe. One of the things, my heart is dear to him because so much of New Orleans were Haitian refugees from the French Revolution that took place there. Just to set the stage for those of you who don't know, there was a big slave revolt in the late 1780s, and people fled, and he was in one of the groups that came to New York, correct?
That's right. In Haiti, he was enslaved, but he was able to work in the house. So he was very close to his family. He was very close to the family that enslaved him. And he had the benefit of being able to practice the faith. He was able to learn how to read, to play instruments.
Oh, wow.
And so he just led what some would say in slavery times was a charmed life.
A privileged life, right? Being a house servant.
Oh, yes. But he realized his father worked out in the fields, and he'd have to deliver messages to his father, and he would see the horrible conditions under which most of the enslaved men particularly worked. And so he was aware of what was going on with the revolution and why it was important. But as things got very, very dangerous, the family that enslaved them, the Barrads, moved to New York City. And they thought it would just be a little brief visit.
Right, everybody did, I think, at that point in time.
Yes, but as it turned out, the father went home to Haiti and had lost almost all of his property. And
I think they burned the house and everything from what I was reading. Yes. I mean, they destroyed it all.
Yes. And so the family was destitute, and he died while he was in Haiti.
Oh, the father did?
The father died while he was in Haiti, leaving his widow in Pierre Toussaint's care in New York.
And I was reading also, too, that Pierre Toussaint, when they came here, they put him to apprentice because they were used to this big estate in Saint-Domingue, and they moved to New York, and it was a smaller home that they rented. And so since he was educated, they apprenticed him. He didn't, I guess, at that point in time have a choice. I don't know if he was at that point he was still enslaved. So they apprenticed him as a hairdresser.
Yes.
And I think what people don't realize when I was reading about this is that, back then you had the Marie Antoinette in the 1700s. They had the big coiffures on top of their head and ribbons, and you really had to be a master, artistful master to do what he did, and as a result could command a lot of money for his services, correct?
And that's exactly
right.
He
used those, though.
He used his wages, his earnings, to maintain the family. And he also, in the process, because of the type of person he was, very faithful and very strong, he became a counselor. You know, people doing your hair, then you have a tendency to share.
And evangelize.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what he did. He was very creative and very popular. And so he was able to maintain the lifestyle of his mistress, the Mrs. Barrard, Madame Barrard, was able to maintain her lifestyle. He was also able to buy the freedom of other slaves, although he never sought his own freedom.
Well, he was taking care of her, too.
He
there was a bond
taking-
between those families,
absolutely,
no doubt, from
absolutely,
what I read.
Absolutely. And she didn't free him until she was on her
died.
deathbed. And so he remained very faithful to her. He attended daily mass. And as you said, his work was evangelization. He also used his funds to help the poor. And so many say that he is actually the founder of Catholic Charities.
Right, the work he
because
did would evolve eventually to what
That's
the
exactly
programs
right.
that in today's world
would be
comparable to what
That's
he was doing as an
exactly right.
individual, right?
That's exactly right.
That's it.
So when he died, he was buried in the cathedral, St. Patrick's Cathedral, which I think he's the only lay person.
Even to today, he's the only lay person buried in
only black
St. Patrick's
person.
Cathedral. Well, the only lay
buried in
person.
it.
I mean, it's
Yes.
reserved for the Archbishops
right.
of New Orleans.
That's exactly right.
And I know
That's right.
during his life as well, I was reading one of the things, I mean, he didn't hesitate to go, like when they had the bad cholera epidemic,
Yes.
to cross the lines where they were saying, it's not safe to go in these neighborhoods because it was rampant. And he didn't hesitate to go into these neighborhoods to take care of the sick, to bring them food, whatever needs they had,
That's
even
exactly right.
under his own sake. Now, I did read that his wife, he married after he was freed. So he was older then, and she was much younger, but he bought her freedom.
That's
And then
right.
married her,
That's
correct?
right.
And
That's
they
right.
said she was as holy a person as
Exactly
him
right.
throughout their lives.
Throughout their
right?
lives together. And he lived to be a very old person.
He
throughout
did.
Through enslavement, through working with the sick, working with the poor. He lived a long life, and his wife as well. So family was very, very important to him. Growing up, he was very close to his grandmother, his great-grandmother. One of them was a doctor and taught him
wow.
herbs and different treatments. So everything he learned, he was able to use in service to God and God's people.
Amazing.
And he did not see, I think he understood himself to be free. In Christ, he was free, even though legally he was still enslaved.
Until her death, right, until his 40s, so
That's
roughly half
exactly
his life
right.
of
Yes,
enslavement,
yes,
correct.
yes.
But of course, in his case, he was the support of the family.
Absolutely.
And she recognized that, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But when I was reading, he was a daily communicant for 66 years.
Yes.
And he put up the money to start a church, start several churches from what I understand, but also when they rebuilt they had the old St. Patrick's
That's
Cathedral, and some of his funds helped to build the new St. Patrick
right.
Cathedral. And then of all things, they of course he was buried there and still is, because when they start this process, now when did they start the process for him? Was it the 1990s, do you know? I mean,
I think,
Or was
the talk started
the talk
as soon as
started
he died.
immediately, right.
As soon as he died.
but part of the process is they have to bring
That's right.
disinter him,
Disinter the body.
bring the
yes.
body up, and
That's
then
right.
make sure it's them.
him.
And then
That's
they
right.
rebury him. And
That's
in
right.
both cases, he's buried under the main altar
Yes,
of
that's
the
right.
St. Patrick's that we know
That's right.
in New York
That's
City
right, that's
for the
right.
life he led. I believe he also opened some orphanages
Oh,
as
yes.
well.
Oh, yes.
There was communication, from what I read, between him and Mother Mary Lange. They were both living about the same time, where he actually sent her money at some point
I would not be
to help her. Right.
Because they were almost, she was maybe 20 years younger than he was. But he would have known.
Well,
he
she
was in
started
New
an
York,
order,
she's
right.
in Baltimore.
So
he
I mean,
would
his
have known.
philanthropy spread far and wide
yes.
in the New York area.
Yes, yes.
My connection, of course, is because him being born in Saint Domingue. My family was born in Saint Domingue, on my maternal
beautiful.
grandmother line. But so I think of I have a connection to him before I ever knew of him. And of course, when Father Josh did the Day of Recollection, I knew a French named Pierre Toussaint,
Yes.
and he took the name Toussaint. He took the name
see?
Toussaint after the General Toussaint, that was in Saint Domingue at the time. At least that's what
That's
all
what
my
you
sources.
heard. All right.
Reading all the sources. So,
Oh,
anyhow.
the lives of these people are so very important because they tell us a lot about our national and international history. And not only do they inspire us to be the best faithful people that we can be, but they show us what's possible.
Correct.
You know, what's
Now, the time frame in
possible.
which he lived was even, was much worse than in today's world because the severe, the number one, enslavement and degradation on that account, but just the humility, the not being respected, all that goes along in that line, and yet he was able to overcome that and go beyond those means with the work that he did.
Oh,
and that's,
absolutely.
with a humble soul. And that's part of the holiness that they look at when they write these, was it postulates? Pisidia, I don't know the word, folks, but they do when someone is recognized as being holy and they bring it to the cardinals in Rome to review them, and they say, okay, then they start collecting all the data to really show the life that they lived.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's what's been done for him, and he's now considered
He's
servant.
venerable.
He is
He's
venerable.
He's
Okay,
venerable. So his cause is
Moving.
the oldest. His is the oldest cause. As a layperson, he doesn't have a community behind him, and so
Right.
New York is keeping track of the process, and I think they're going to have a new delegate in Rome. I think whoever
Great.
his postulator was died, and so they have to replace him so that the cause then can move forward.
Great.
So,
So, folks, I hope y'all have learned more about this wonderful holy man that lived up in New York in the early 1800s, and the wonderful life he's had. Say a prayer. There are prayers on the internet that you can find. There's also much more about his life on the internet if you're interested in learning more.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to be talking about Mother Mary Lange. She was an African-American woman who founded the very first congregation of religious women called the Oblates of
Oblate Sisters of Providence.
of Providence, correct. And that was like in 1829.
Yes, that's right.
And I have with me Kathleen Bellow, who is the director of the Institute of Black Catholics
Studies.
here at Black Catholic Studies here at Xavier University.
that's right.
And so with that, Mother Mary Lange, she was actually born like Elizabeth Clarice Lange.
Yes.
Now she was again
Born in Haiti.
in Haiti.
Born
However,
in
they fled the
Haiti.
revolution.
Went to Cuba.
She was a little bit younger than Pierre Toussaint.
Yes.
But they flee, they go to Cuba.
Yes.
And she was very well educated, came from a very wealthy family.
Yes.
So she had some
Means.
income coming in. She had some means to her. So tell us
That's
a little
right.
bit about
That's right.
what happened with her.
She left Cuba and ended up in Baltimore City, Maryland. And as she got there, she realized that there were many other French-speaking black children. And for her, their greatest need was education. So she opened up her home. She used her money to educate black children. And along the way, she was inspired to begin the Oblate Sisters of Providence. As you say, the first community of religious women, African-American women in the country, 1829. And with her began then this long legend of Catholic education in Baltimore and eventually 15 other states.
I was reading that. It's
15
amazing.
other
And other
states.
countries. She's
Oh,
in,
absolutely, because in Haiti,
I want to say
Belize,
25
yes.
different countries are
Yes,
listed
absolutely.
where her order has spread
Yes,
out to, which is
yes,
amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So Mother Mary Lange is very dear to me. My name is Kathleen Dorsey Bellow. I'm a Dorsey, and Dorseys are Baltimoreans, Catholic family. Many of my family were taught by the Oblate Sisters of Providence.
That's
my mother,
amazing, yes.
my father, my sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles, and many of black Catholics in the United States were taught by Mother Mary Lange and her congregation in Baltimore or throughout the country. And she too, she started off with means. She's almost the opposite of Pierre Toussaint. She started off with means, and she used her means up for the education
of and not just that, orphanage. You know, these children. She comes here. She comes here from Cuba, and she does have means, but then we've got the same situation going on here, and they've got these orphan children. I didn't realize how, in doing my research, how many refugees, French refugees from Saint-Domingue were on the eastern seaboard, because of course New Orleans. So she walked into quite a large number of French-speaking people that were there, you know, as well. And there were schools, from what I read, there were no free public schools. I mean, some of the other denominations, there were like 5 African-American schools, but they were like the Methodist, Episcopalian, and even then they weren't meeting the needs of the children and the young people that were in Baltimore that needed education. And that was her first choice. But she's another one of those that crossed over the barriers when they said don't go in these communities for cholera. And her community at that time, from what I read, was a very few. They had just started it, and they had maybe 11 or 15, I don't remember the number exactly, but they didn't want the whole community to get sick. So they decided just half of them would go administer to people with cholera, and she wanted to make sure she was one of the 4 or 5 that went into these neighborhoods, and they did. So as well as the education, I mean, she was another one whose holy life is evident by the work that she did.
Oh, yes. They took in sick people who were deserted by their family. They took in the elderly. They did all kinds of service in order to maintain the community and then to help the community at large.
And then grow. Yes, as much as they've grown.
Oh, absolutely. And the devotion of the women really was a model for parents, you know, because they saw how much the sisters sacrificed to teach their children. So they, of course, then whatever the sisters needed that they could give. So that the sisters really inspired black parents to raise their children well, to keep them in the faith, and for the students, I was a student of the Oblate Sisters of Providence. They expected the best
from you.
There was none of this little sliding off and no, because then we realize now that many of them did not have formal education, maybe past high school themselves. However, they prepared us. They struggled
to go out and meet the world.
That's exactly right.
That's it. And you know, when times were poor for her, when times were down for her, she did whatever she needed to provide. I mean, she even became a domestic in one of the seminaries in order to keep the schools open, to feed others, you know, to help others, clothe them, whatever it might be.
That's right.
Now, it's interesting because I knew nothing of the Oblates.
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 Well, we say in Baltimore we call them the Oblate Sisters of Providence.
It's like amen, amen, amen. So the Oblates. And when I was working on the exhibit here in New Orleans that featured Henriette DeLille, and we were going back in the Catholic directories, which is a directory of all the different affiliations and parishes and everything going all the way back. The Archdiocese of New Orleans here has one. Well, they go back into the 1820s. They go back until they were first built. And so we were looking for when did Henriette get her order established. And it was interesting because we saw, you know, her order. We saw Mother Mary Lange's order in those early books, and they were the only ones. They would give the number of them, you know, when we were researching that. And it's interesting because she did have a very, she had a habit that looked like, you know, a nun's habit or a sister's habit. With her with the top hat, which is unusual in that day and time, especially for African American women.
That's right, because Maryland was still a slave state, and religious women were not recognized.
No, and they denied Henriette's group that for many years.
Black people are not holy, was the thinking at the time, and so she fought that. You know, she had good support in the church.
She had great
good
support
in the church and in the community, and so she was able to. I mean, it's just amazing what she had to overcome and what she did overcome. And she lived also to many, many years. So she was able to see, you know, some of the fruits of her labor, and even today. St. Francis Academy was established in 1826.
I know. I
in
was reading that. I was
Baltimore.
going to bring that up.
And it is it's still operating,
It
fully
is.
functioning today in East Baltimore. My mother went to St. Francis Academy, and my nephew, my mother's grandson, also graduated from St. Francis Academy. It became co-ed in the 1990s, and so young men could also go to St. Francis Academy. But it's the longest running operating Catholic high school.
Imagine that, 200 years
in the
a few
United
years.
States, that's
It'll be
right.
200
That's
years.
exactly
I mean,
right.
that is amazing for
Yes,
any school,
any
whether it's
school.
African American or not. But I
That's
mean,
right.
with that kind of legacy directly from her,
That's
you know,
exactly
that's
right.
just amazing the work she did, and her support was a French
right.
priest who was from Haiti as well, and that recognized the need and sought her out. Her and another woman that they found out they were working from her house,
yes.
which is amazing. So.
Oh, I mean, when we go back and look at the stories, because sometimes we get caught up in the holiness of people, that they must have been in church all the time praying. When we go back and really look at their lives and see how they fought on behalf of the community, how they collaborated with others, how they fought for social justice and recognized the need, and then just gave everything that they had.
Literally, and you mean
Everything
that literally.
they had for the common good. Catholics and non-Catholics.
Yeah, she was.
You know, they
She
were
did not matter.
ecumenical.
She took them all
That's
in.
exactly right. That's exactly right. So we're blessed to be able to research and read about these holy people, to learn about their lives, to inspire us to do better, to be better, because compared to the struggles that they have, we
that's
have
no
many more
comparison.
resources today
Absolutely.
than they had.
And the
so-
beauty of that, too, is that in cases like her, she is venerable.
Yes. She's still serving of God.
She's still serving of God. Okay, so in her
She's
case,
just a
you know,
God.
as they build that history and
Yes.
they unearth more documents,
That's
you get
right.
that much more
That's right.
history and that much more
That's right.
information about the life
Oh,
that they
yes.
lived, and it never goes away. I mean, you're
yes.
you're constantly learning about the works they did.
That's
They
right.
go in there and that's part of the cost, folks, is that
Yes.
it takes such a tremendous amount of finances to do this work.
amount of
So please
campaign,
donate to the
yes.
cause of these.
Oh,
Read and study
yes.
about these individuals,
Yes.
and then support the
And
cause
pray,
and hear.
Pray for their intercession, because it's the miracles
Yes.
that push them over, pushing them over the top. And I think in our community, we're used to miracles. We're used to miracles happening, but in the case of these special six, what the church is saying to us is, we need the stories. Tell us the story. So we can't just keep it to ourselves or in the
That's it.
family or in the church parish. We have to recognize, we have to pray, then we need to recognize God's answer based on their intercession,
That's it.
so that the church can say, oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
It's definitely
this is
there.
a sign
That's right.
that, yes, this person should be elevated to be a role model of Christianity, of Catholicism for the church local and the church worldwide.
Well, that's a perfect ending note. Kathleen,
All
thank you so
right.
much for being my guest
Thank you for
to talk
asking
about these wonderful people that we're trying to educate our viewers on. Like me, I knew nothing of it a year ago, and now I'm campaigning for them all and love them dearly. So thank you again.
Thank you for your work.